Welcome to Enjoy the Journey podcast, where we interview expert entrepreneurs and thought leaders to help guide you in pursuit of financial freedom. Presented to you by Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, where we help service-based business owners remove cash flow bottlenecks, maximize their profits, and turn business profits into personal wealth. G'day guys, this is Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and we're here for another episode of the Enjoy the Journey podcast. And I'm very excited because I've got a very special guest today, Annalisa Parent from Laurel Elite. And Annalisa specializes in helping business owners unpack their IP and create amazing books that help them grow their business. And I'm really looking forward to jumping into the subject because writing books is something that I'm very passionate about. And I know that before I wrote my first book, I was very scared around the whole journey. But after going through the process, understanding that by working with experts like Annalisa, it can actually be a really straightforward and easy process, which I think many people might think that's probably sounds too good to be true. It actually makes it very, very simple, and it's been amazing for our business. So I really want to share what getting expert advice around writing your book can do for your business and how you can use it to achieve your goals. So Annalisa, thanks for joining us. How's things?
Thank you so much for having me. Things are going great. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
I appreciate you making the time. So Annalisa, tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Sure. So I am the CEO of Laurel Elite Books. We help entrepreneurs to write, publish, and sell their expert books. And not just any expert book, but really the expert book that is going to draw in your ideal client and turn off your non-ideal client so that when you're getting on sales calls, you're getting on calls with people who already know, like, and trust you, and they're ready to buy into your services and products.
I love that. You're talking my language, Annalisa, because I know that through publishing my book, it's great when you've got somebody who's read it and they're talking your language and they're using the lingo and you go, yeah, this is a person who gets me. But we've also had people call us and say, hey, I've read your book and what you do doesn't resonate with me at all. And I'm like, perfect, I've just dodged a bullet, which is amazing. So, Annalisa, let's talk a little bit about your journey. Where did this whole book writing and publishing situation start for you? What's the origin story?
Yeah, so I'm a storyteller from way back. I'm sure I talked my mother's ear off and then wrote down the stories as soon as I could. I had my first piece published when I was 9 years old. So this is just something that's near and dear to my heart. And so helping other people to get out their message in a meaningful way is really, really important to me, to who I am, to my mission in life. And when it comes to entrepreneurs, so many entrepreneurs have some writing skills. They've certainly done a lot of writing, but being able to tell their own story and tell it well and tell it in a way that is forward facing and is really going to speak to their clients' needs isn't necessarily within their skill set. And so I've got a real heart for creating that communication bridge between entrepreneurs who have a lot to share in their expertise, but may not know the very best way to get that out and share it with the people who need to hear it.
Makes a lot of sense because I find that there's typically kind of two types of people who go out to write books. There's people who end up writing this huge manifesto that ends up being like 100,000 words and they haven't even got their point across. Or there's people who hit that kind of the age-old saying of writer's block. They hit a wall and they go, wow, I just don't know what else I'm going to say. So talk to me a little bit about how you help authors overcome those issues and actually get their ideas out into the world that actually not just is about thought leadership, but it's about attracting the right people.
Absolutely. Well, one of the writer's block conundrums that I frequently see business owners, CEOs, entrepreneurs in is, you spoke to it before. We live in our lingo every day, and sometimes we forget how much we really know about our area of expertise. Even though we're coaching or training people all of the time on that, if I ask you, tell me about what you know, that's an impossible question for you to answer because there's such a wealth of knowledge there. So it's all about the right questions to get to not only what do I know, but then how do I communicate that? Order do I put it in? How does it belong? What pieces belong and which pieces don't belong? Those are all questions that entrepreneurs frequently get entrenched in. And I love the work of helping them to get clarity because good writing at the end of the day is all about clarity. And when it's your project, when it's your business, when it's you, having that clarity, as we all know in our lives, isn't always as easy as we'd like it to be. And having that outside coach, those outside eyes, those outside ears to help to dig into what the golden nuggets of wisdom are within your field, that's where the magic happens.
I love that. I think that makes perfect sense. So I guess, do you think that typically entrepreneurial style is to dive into things head first and kind of work it out on the way? What's your view of having a book outline or creating like a skeleton of your book before you dive in? Because I know that you've written a book where it might be a little bit contrary your opinion on this matter.
Yeah, well, I wrote a book for what are called pantsers, writers who fly by the seat of their pants, mostly because they're an incredibly underserved group of writers in the world. There are thousands of books on how to outline or create some kind of structure, and very few books on how to, people who sort of write a chapter here and write a chapter there, and then what do you do with it? And the standard advice in the writing industry is, well, just write an outline. Well, these people don't have brains, and I studied neuroscience. They don't have brains that really function well in outlines. So, my advice to any writer, whether you're an entrepreneur or you want to be a poet laureate, is to find the writer you are and be that writer. And that's the hard work, is finding the writer that you are. And, again, that's where my joy comes in helping people, watching those light bulb moments where they say, oh, not only did I just write a really powerful paragraph, but now I understand what the process is for me in order to write that paragraph. Because then you can write paragraph after paragraph and book after book. And that's really the point. You know this, Jackson, better than anyone. You write one expert book, and then the next thing you know, your next expert book comes along and you've got more to share. You need those skills in order to be able to write book after book after book. And part of that is understanding what is your process. It might be an outline, it might be painting a picture. I don't know. But the point is that you have to find what your process is so you can be that writer and get into creative flow.
I think that's so important because I remember my first mentor, he taught me about how he wrote his book. And his writing style was that he created an outline and then he locked himself in the woods for a week and he was not leaving that little shack until the book was written. Like, oh wow, that's like writing like 50,000 words or 60,000 words in a week with no other visual stimulation or distractions would send me mental. And look, I tend to write my books quickly, but I know my pace that I need to write at, and I try and position it as a bit of a marathon where I have a daily word count. I know exactly what I'm trying to achieve that day. I get it done, and then I move on to the next thing. But that doesn't work for everyone. That might be really scary. So let's talk about where people tend to make the biggest mistakes when it comes to writing their book, with an outline or otherwise. What are the common traps that authors you find themselves in that result in them not getting to the end of the goal as I guess, as quickly or efficiently as they otherwise could have?
Yeah, in terms of writing, one of the biggest mistakes that I see many entrepreneurs have a blog or a newsletter, information that they're sharing. They think that all that they need is a book, right? So they hear this common wisdom, everybody needs a book. You have to have a book that's out there. And so that they think that the book is the important thing. And maybe it is, although, as you have a podcast. Just because someone has a book, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to invite them to be on your podcast. It certainly isn't going to get them on national television, regardless of what country you're in. You have to have a good book. You have to have a meaningful book in order to have that expert status, which is one thing that a book can get you. It's going to leverage your expertise. But more importantly, to have a good book is to reach your audience. And if they want to read your blog, I'm sorry, but they're going to go to your blog. They don't need a published anthology of your blog entries. The other thing that happens when entrepreneurs collate their blogs and call it a book is that it's not really cohesive. It's actually a poor representation of them. It looks like a slap job. Some entrepreneurs I've seen will try to massage it a little bit and make them go together. That doesn't mean that your blog can't be part of what you put together as a book, but a compilation of blog entries is nothing more than a compilation of blog entries. If you want to be seen as an expert in the marketplace, if you want to reach your ideal audience, then I always start everything with strategy. You know this about me, Jackson. That's where you start. You start with the strategy of, how do I reach these people? How do I establish myself as an expert? The answer to that is rarely going to be a compilation of your blog. So write to the strategy of what it is that you want to do.
Yeah, I think this is really critical because yeah, there are a lot of people out there that say, yeah, just write 12 blogs and then we'll collate them into a book. And people should take pride in their book because it's such a big achievement. And I guess the last thing you want to do is look back on your book and say, I cheated. Like I went and just repurposed some other stuff that I did. I slapped a pretty cover on it and an ISBN and chucked it on Amazon and I'm now a great author. I can look back on my books with pride because I've put in the effort and I've put in the time and it's not as difficult as people think. So, with this being in mind, Annalisa, what are the building blocks to a great book, would you say?
So, some of the building blocks for a great book are knowing your audience, having your audience in mind, and knowing how to speak to your audience. So, if you're working with beginners in your field, then there's going to be a lot that you're going to have to explain in terms of jargon and the way that things work in your industry. If you're speaking to people who have a certain degree of expertise, then you need to take it to the next level. There's no one size fits all. You can't write to the beginners at the same time that you write to the experts. And that's a really important distinction in terms of how you put your book together, really knowing who your audience is and how to speak to them to give them valuable information. And then the other piece that I would say is really important, it's not about you, which is funny because we think we're putting together an expert book and it's about us, but it isn't. And I'm sorry to tell you all this, but nobody cares about you. Unless you're already an A-list star and people really care about like what color undergarments you purchase. The rest of us who walk here on earth, nobody cares. And so it's really about what your audience needs and wants and how you really can be of service to them. And you're going to include some anecdotes. People will come to know, like, and trust you through the context of your book. But if you start out with me, you're going to be that person at the cocktail party that everyone seems to be avoiding.
Yeah, I hear you 100%. I think it gets pretty old very quickly when people start diving into talking about themselves. People read a book because they want to achieve a specific outcome, and they see that book as the vehicle that gets them there. And I think the other point here, Annalisa, is that this is very personal because as an expert, no one really knows your audience better than you do. And I see many entrepreneurs and thought leaders looking to outsource the writing of their book using ghostwriters and things like this. Many friends who've gone down that avenue and they end up getting a book back that doesn't encompass really even a fraction of what they believe in and their values. So, why do you think ghostwriting is a bad idea?
For the same reason that if you were asked to appear on television, you wouldn't send your sibling. They may look like you, they may talk like you, they may have some of the same mannerisms as you, but they are not you. And your brand as an entrepreneur, and many of the people I work with are solopreneurs, they are the face of their business. Their personality is integral to their brand. And so needs to be in your voice. So number one, brand consistency. You're the face of your business and you should be representing it. There's some authenticity there as well. You show up as you, and people are going to know, like, and trust you or not. And the or not is the just as important. When you start out in your business and like the first person says no, it might feel yucky. But as you get to a certain degree in your business, you realize that the no's are just as important as the yeses because you really want to be working with the right people. So some people who are listening to me right now are nodding as Jackson is and saying, yes, I agree. Some people out there are saying, yeah, no way, that's not for me. I want to do something else. I think that's wonderful. They should do their something else. And the people who resonate with me, I would love to work with. And that's a really important part of showing up in your authenticity in who you are. And the reason why brand consistency is even important to begin with.
Yep, I agree with that completely. Particularly when you're in an information style or a service business, you just can't fake that stuff. It's so important. People see through it very, very quickly. So I guess on that point, as coaches and as a coach myself who works with clients internationally, a book makes a lot of sense. But I speak to a lot of clients where I do feel that they would benefit from having a book and sharing their ideas, but their rebuttal is often, well, I only serve a local market. My clients are within a 5 kilometer radius of me, maybe. So what does a book do for me globally when I'm working in that local environment? What are the types of businesses that you feel really benefit from having a book? And are there maybe some businesses that you feel might not, writing a book might not be a good idea?
Absolutely. That's a really important distinction. And when we're thinking about marketing as entrepreneurs, we need to be thinking about where our audience is. I work with entrepreneurs and writers. And so working with the written word makes a whole lot of sense for me and my industry. If you were a video coach of some type, a book might not make sense for you. Probably your audience is really going to want to have a video interface. The same thing with audio if you're working with radio or podcasts. So it could be industry specific and where your audience is. You also have to be careful about not just your marketing money, obviously, and talk to Jackson about this, but be careful about how you're spending your money on your business. But even more important, I think, is how you're spending your time and your energy on your business. And so, it takes a lot of time and energy and vulnerability and digging deep and drafting to write a book. And so it has to be the right answer for where your audience is and what they're expecting of you. I don't think that it's as much a geographic question as it is relevant to where your audience is. I think if you're serving people just in your town, a book could be very useful, especially because everybody knows you in your town. You could have your book at the dentist's office, and that would be kind of cool. So I think it's less geographic and much more about your industry and where your audience is hanging out.
Yeah, perfect. I agree with that completely. I think a book's been such a great resource for us because we've used it as an evergreen lead magnet. It's helped us generate an abundance of opportunity. But one of the things that I think many people overlook is that having a book, creating that authority allows you to increase your price. And by having that authority, then we are perceived as being more valuable. And for that reason, we can have that reflective in the way that we price our services. What other ways have you seen a book benefiting your clients, Annalisa?
Well, certainly exposure. Many of our clients, I'm in the United States, you can tell by my accent, I'm sure. Many of our clients have been not only on international news, but on really prominent national news outlets. And, once you're on Fox News, CBS Morning, people take notice of you. And when tens of thousands of people are noticing you, you've got a flood of people through your doors. The other thing that's really useful about a book, and we're about to get into one of my pet peeves here. So, there is a way to create best selling status on Amazon that actually means you sold no books, or you sold 3 books, or you sold 5 books. I like to think of best selling as actual best selling, which means that you sell a lot of books. And when you sell a lot of books, people are reading a lot of books. And when people are reading a lot of books, your number of clients go up. I've talked to you about this, Jackson, in the past before, but people say, well, why should I write a book? Am I going to make any money? Am I going to get return on my investment? The return on investment of a book is not in book revenue. If you're thinking about a book to get revenue, then you're thinking of a book in the wrong way. You're not going to make a lot of money. I call it taking your spouse out to dinner money. Now, my best-selling author has sold over 500,000 books. That's over $7.5 million in revenue for him. That's some pretty good take your spouse out to dinner money. But the real revenue is in the lead gen. It's in getting the right clients through the door and then selling whatever your product, program, services are to those people who already want to work with you.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I think my perspective in the initial outset was, yeah, I'm going to get this book and I'm going to put it in bookstores and we'll sell it at $30 a pop and we'll make money. But now we actually give the book away because we know that, yeah, it costs us $14 or $9, depending on the volume that we buy of our books. But that's a really cheap lead. That we can get somebody to give us all of their information and then also put their hand up to say, hey, I'm actually really interested in this subject. And then that opens up a conversation, which is what this is all about. Now, Annalisa, most people are overwhelmed because there's a lot involved in writing a book. Why should somebody work with a business like Laurel Elite?
That's a great question. And going back to your earlier point about entrepreneurs, they're very dive in. They also really like to do things on their own. I see a lot of authors, entrepreneur authors, who have written in school, and so they think that they can write, or these days it's fairly easy to put together a book and put it on Amazon. But that would sort of be like me, I'm going to go on national television, I think I'll cut my own hair and sew my own clothes and wear them to the interview. Now maybe I would look okay, but it probably wouldn't be my best foot forward to be on national television. I probably should buy some clothes that a professional made and have a professional do my hair and makeup. it sounds silly when I use that as an example because most of us understand that you would present yourself well on national television, but oftentimes a self published book, a self written book without any coaching presents in the way that I would if I showed up in my home zone, make do clothes. So, getting that expert help can really give it that edge to look like a book. People like me who work with books, I can tell you in 5 seconds or less how a book was made, whether or not it was self published, whether or not it's a registered book or if it's just a self published book. And so, you mentioned bookstores, Jackson. Certainly in the United States, it is true, and in all English speaking countries where I have worked, that bookstores won't take self published books. They don't have time to vet them. And book professionals can tell. You're not going to fool a book professional on whether or not it's a registered published book or not. We know these things, we know what to look for. We're professionals, we know what the industry standards are. Do you want to be in bookstores? You're going to get a lot of audience in a bookstore. Do you want to be in libraries? You're going to get a lot of audience in libraries. If you do, then you need a professionally produced book that through a registered publishing house. And that's something that you're going to want to know whether or not your potential publisher. There are people out there who call themselves publishers, but they're basically just doing the steps of self publishing your book for you, and it's not going to get you any of the leverage. I hear a lot of those stories on my speaking gigs of people who fell for that kind of scam. So if you want that kind of reach, where you are national and you're in bookstores or chains, we get our clients into airports or Walmart. You really need that professionally produced, registered publishing house book.
Beautiful. I love that. Fantastic. So, Annalisa, we've covered a lot of content today, but if you had to summarize the top 3 tips for entrepreneurs who are either wanting to write their first book or wanting to write their next book and do it the right way, what would be your top 3 tips for them?
So, authenticity, stay true to who you are and who your audience is. Of course, get help. I might be a little bit biased on that one, but have those professional eyes. At the very least, get a copy editor to look over your copy before you do anything with it. And clarity on your message. Know what it is that you're trying to do with your book so that you know what it is that you need to say with your book.
I love that. Beautiful tips. Now, Annalisa, if anybody's listened to this podcast or watched this podcast and they loved what you had to say and want to get in touch, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you and how can you help them?
Absolutely. So I offer a free scaling consultation. We can talk about how a book can scale your business, and you can find out all about that over at laurelelite.com.
Beautiful. We'll include a link to that in the show notes. Annalisa, it's been amazing chatting with you. I really love everything that you do, and there's just so much value here. And the key point here is that most entrepreneurs don't know what they don't know when it comes to this stuff, and it pays to do this right because it can have a drastic and dramatic effect on your business and the results that you get as a result of your book. So I appreciate you making the time, and looking forward to chatting to you again soon.
That sounds great. Thank you, Jackson.